At first glance, the Demon Slayer story shouldn't work at all. Regular humans with a few years of training are somehow supposed to take on demons with infinite stamina, regeneration, superhuman strength, and supersonic speed. The only reason Muzan dies is because he makes a series of catastrophic mistakes. But what if he had the foresight to avoid all of them? Today, I'll be exploring how the Demon Slayer story would change if Kibutsuji Muzan was reborn with his powers and memories. Our story begins at the sunrise countdown, when Muzan is finally backed into a corner by the Demon Slayers with their bright red Nichiren blades bearing down on him. In the original timeline, Muzan injected all of his blood into Tanjiro in the hopes of creating a new demon king with immunity to the sun. But in this storyline, Muzan is so blinded by rage that the thought of turning Tanjiro into a demon doesn't even cross his mind. He looks back at every moment in his life with regret, from allowing the Demon Slayers to flourish in the Sengoku era to giving Tamayo the opportunity to inject him with her anti-demon drug. Those combined negative emotions are so powerful that they manage to warp the fabric of time itself, throwing Muzan's consciousness back into the past as his body burns under the rising sun. Now there are two versions of this story that I want to explore, depending on whether Muzan is reborn in the Sengoku era to face Yoriichi, or whether he emerges in the Taisho era to face the new generation of Demon Slayers. Let's start with the first version, where Muzan's memories return to the moment where he first became a demon. In canon, he gradually discovered his powers and grew stronger until that fateful encounter with Yoriichi. Muzan is walking through a bamboo forest with Tamayo, a demon he has kept under his control, when he spots a Demon Slayer. Unlike the other swordsmen he killed, this is a quiet, unassuming man with a crimson blade and an almost serene expression. The one thing we know about Muzan is that his arrogance knows no limits, and at this stage, he completely dismisses Yoriichi, thinking that he would barely be a challenge. So Muzan attacks first, and for a split second, it looks like the right call. His arm sweeps are devastatingly fast, with a reach so enormous that the bamboo grove behind Yoriichi is shredded before he even finishes moving. Yoriichi barely dodges and registers fear for the first time in his life. A single scratch would kill him. But what the Demon Slayer didn't know was that Yoriichi was already looking inside Muzan using the transparent world, and he saw what no one else had ever seen. 7 hearts and 5 brains, all shifting position freely within Muzan's body. In an instant, he adapted and fused all 12 sun-breathing forms into a single continuous sequence that cut through every one of Muzan's vital organs in one motion. Muzan couldn't regenerate, and out of pure panic and survival instinct, he did the only thing he could. He exploded into 1,800 fragments of flesh. Yoriichi destroyed 1,500 of them, but the 300 pieces that escaped were enough for Muzan to rebuild. When he turns to Tamayo, Yoriichi doesn't see a demon. She's a woman that has finally had her wishes fulfilled and been liberated from the Demon King. From that point onward, the Demon Slayer core flourishes. Tamayo continues researching demon physiology, and Yoriichi becomes a wandering swordsman. This is where we find the first major divergence, because a reborn Muzan with intact memories does not walk into that bamboo forest with casual arrogance. Now he knows that Yoriichi possesses the Demon Slayer mark, access to the transparent world, and the selfless state. Muzan also knows that Yoriichi created sun-breathing from nothing, and that every other breathing style in existence is a diluted, incomplete derivative of it. Now, this version of Muzan is stronger than the one that lost to Yoriichi thanks to more years of experience, but he doesn't want to take any risks. So Reborn Muzan's entire strategy in the Sengoku era centers on a single non-negotiable rule. Yoriichi Tsugikuni must never get within sword range. Yoriichi's abilities are almost entirely a close quarters proposition. The 13th form requires the sword to reach vital organs, and every gift Yoriichi has is built for the moment of contact, which means the winning move is to ensure that moment never comes. Muzan also knows that he will never age, while Yoriichi will eventually die at the age of 80, meaning that he can just let nature take care of his biggest threat. With Muzan not being out of commission for a few decades, he has more time to strategize and coordinate the actions of his upper moons. The most important of these is Kokushibo, because even as a human, he was only second to Yoriichi in strength. A reborn Muzan wouldn't just let Kokushibo roam around, and would instead order him to start systematically dismantling the Demon Slayer core. The Sengoku era is described as the golden age of Demon Slayers, as it had more marked swordsmen and more Hashira-level fighters than any era that followed it. A reborn Muzan would understand that this generation is the foundation of the Demon Slayer core, and would move to break it from the inside out. Kokushibo would be used to eliminate the Hashira, ensuring that not only sun-breathing, but also the advanced techniques of all other breathing styles are totally wiped out. But there's an even more terrifying third option that Muzan could take. In the canon timeline, Yoriichi visits the Kamado family after his fight with Muzan, and befriends Sumiyoshi, an ancestor of Tanjiro. Sumiyoshi watches Yoriichi perform his sun-breathing forms, and memorizes every movement, turning it into the Hinokami Kagura, a dance that gets passed down through 17 generations until it reaches Tanjiro's hands. In canon, Muzan doesn't figure this out, but in this timeline, he tracks Yoriichi when he visits them and finds the location of the Kamado household. He watches as Sumiyoshi develops the Hinokami Kagura and patiently waits until Yoriichi leaves the Kamado family on their own. Killing a bunch of coal burners is a walk in the park for Muzan, and he ends the Kamado bloodline in the Sengoku era itself, ensuring that Tanjiro is never born. This has crazy implications for the future, because it means that all knowledge of sun-breathing has been erased from the face of the earth. In order for demon slayers to enter the mark state, they need to fight alongside a marked sun-breathing user. But if sun-breathing is no more, that means no future generations can activate their demon slayer marks. But the demon slayers still have one hope: Tamayo's anti-demon drug. If they can take away Muzan's regeneration and other abilities like splitting himself into multiple parts, that at least gives the demon slayers a fighting chance. In canon, Muzan never pursues Tamayo aggressively, because in his diminished state, he underestimates what she will become. That's the single most consequential mistake of his 1,000-year existence, because when she saw Yoriichi slice Muzan into pieces and felt the Demon King's hold on her slip, that moment of hope drove the next 5 centuries of her life. She spent those centuries as a doctor, a researcher, and a demon who refused to harm humans. Tamayo built a body of knowledge about demon biology so precise that she was eventually able to design a compound targeting Muzan's 4 greatest physiological advantages: his demon nature, immortality, fragmentation, and cellular regeneration. A reborn Muzan knows all of this, so even though Yoriichi doesn't liberate her, Muzan kills Tamayo within days of meeting her instead of ever turning her into a demon. So what does the Sengoku era look like in this version? Yoriichi wanders Japan looking for Muzan, but he finds nothing. The Demon King has gone dark, and the demon slayers of the Golden Era are either executed by Kokushibo or slowly burned through their 25-year lifespan without ever landing a decisive blow. Breathing styles spread, but sun breathing eventually dies out as any of Yoriichi's disciples are hunted down and executed once Muzan is done with Sumiyoshi Kamado. Kokushibo and the Upper Moons work through the night, and every new generation of the Demon Slayers is weaker than their predecessors. By the time we get to the Taisho era, we still have prodigies like Muichiro, Sanemi, and Gyomei, but they lack the training and guidance to become top-tier threats. But the biggest difference is that Tanjiro and Nezuko are both never born in this timeline, which means there's no sun-breathing user, and no demon who achieves immunity to the sun. While the Demon Slayers remain weak, critical tests like the attack on Swordsmith Village or the Infinity Castle Showdown never happen, because the Demon Slayer Corps simply aren't powerful enough to warrant such a response. Meanwhile, Muzan continues his search for the Blue Spider Lily, and humanity and demons remain at an equilibrium for the foreseeable future. This is a pretty anticlimactic ending, because the Demon Slayer Corps never even had a chance. So now let's take a look at our second timeline, where Muzan is reborn in the Taisho era instead of repeating his origin. In the Taisho era, Muzan's downfall is methodical, with the top tiers of his demons being taken out gradually by the Demon Slayers. It begins as far back as the fight with Enmu, when a couple of mid-ranked Demon Slayers manage to behead the Upper Moon 1 with an extra dose of Muzan's blood. In the Entertainment District arc, an Upper Moon is killed for the first time in centuries, and things only get worse in the Swordsmith Village as Gyoko and Hantengu are taken out as well. But Muzan doesn't learn his lesson and walks right into a trap at the Ubuyashiki mansion. He taunts Kaguya, but the head of the Ubuyashiki family is already dying and nearly blind. Kaguya knows precisely where Muzan is and blows the mansion apart. The Demon King is exposed for a precious few seconds, and Tamayo moves immediately to inject him with her drug. You already know how things unfold from there onwards, as the Demon Slayers wipe out every single demon before finally reaching Muzan. So what does Muzan change in order to achieve his objectives in this timeline? The first option is to eliminate the Kamado family before Tanjiro is old enough to hold a blade. This makes sense because, as I've explained earlier, eliminating sun-breathing solves a ton of Muzan's problems and also weakens the rest of the Demon Slayer Corps. But there's a problem with this, because now Muzan would be eliminating Nezuko, and along with her, his chances of conquering the sun. You see, Muzan doesn't know at what point Nezuko became immune to sunlight, or what caused that mutation in her physiology. If he takes out the Kamado family this early in the timeline, there's a high chance that Nezuko might not even survive the transformation, and even if she does, there's no guarantee that she'll be immune to sunlight. So despite his killer instincts, Muzan is forced to wait, and instead he chooses to observe the Kamado siblings from afar on their travels. However, there's one character Muzan can eliminate without affecting the timeline negatively, and that's Tamayo. Every stage of the anti-Muzan drug traces back to Tamayo's 5th-century research program. The human conversion stage was built by tracking Nezuko's blood evolution. The aging stage was proposed by Shinobu but required Tamayo's understanding of Muzan's physiology to implement. The division prevention stage was designed specifically around what Tamayo observed in the bamboo forest, with Muzan shattering to escape Yoriichi. And the cellular destruction stage required intimate knowledge of demon biology that only Tamayo possessed. Remove Tamayo, and you remove the drug entirely. A reborn Muzan treats Tamayo as the second most dangerous entity in the world after Yoriichi himself. She is a demon with 5 centuries of uninterrupted medical research, a collaborative relationship with the Demon Slayer Corps, and a personal vendetta against him that makes her incapable of half measures. However, given that Tamayo has escaped Muzan's control, it's unlikely that he would be able to kill her easily. But Muzan can certainly make her life difficult. Muzan knows that Tamayo is operating as a doctor of some sort, and given that this is Taisho-era Japan and he has an army of demons at his disposal, tracking down Tamayo shouldn't be a big issue. While Tamayo might escape with Yushiro, Muzan won't let her operate in peace, meaning that Tamayo's research gets pushed back continuously. Muzan's next step in shutting down Tamayo's research is to hunt down and kill the insect Hashira Shinobu Kocho. He already saw how potent Shinobu's poison is through Doma's eyes, so Muzan must have deduced that Shinobu collaborated with Tamayo at some point. Doma dies by consuming Shinobu, and that decision is driven by his psychopathic nature, so most other upper moons wouldn't make the same mistake. Add to this the fact that Shinobu lacks the strength to behead stronger demons, so even the likes of Gyoko and Hantengu would be able to take her out in a one-on-one battle. Muzan orchestrates Shinobu's death well before the events of the Infinity Castle arc, and as a result, the Demon Slayers lose their expert on poisons. Tamayo never perfects her drug, but things get even worse, because what if Muzan never turns up to be injected with it? Turning up at the Ubuyashiki mansion was a terrible mistake on Muzan's part, and this one is almost embarrassingly preventable in hindsight. Muzan, in his arrogance, walks into the home of his single most dedicated enemy, a family that has spent a millennium engineering his death, and just expects to walk out of there unharmed. Kaguya was prepared for this. The entire encounter was a trap, and Muzan walked into it because he simply couldn't imagine that a dying blind man in a wheelchair presented a genuine threat to him. Reborn Muzan isn't so careless. If the Demon Slayers do begin the Hashira training, Muzan won't just walk in himself before starting the battle. Instead, Muzan sends an upper moon, someone expendable like Kaigaku, to assassinate the Ubuyashiki family. He calls it a special mission and sends Kaigaku to his death, but the objective is achieved. Without Muzan physically present, he can't be hurt by the explosion or poison. But there's another aspect to this as well, because if it's just Kaigaku who gets taken out, Kaguya, his wife, and 2 daughters died in vain. This is a huge hit to the Demon Slayers' morale, because originally, Kaguya's sacrifice was like a rallying call for them, and was proof that the Demon King could be hurt. But this time, he died taking out a completely inconsequential demon, and that hurts the Demon Slayers far more than any loss on the battlefield. Without the explosion and the drug, everything that follows is different. Muzan in the final battle is not a weakening, deteriorating creature running out of time. He's the Demon King at full power, in an enclosed space against an exhausted core that has just bled through all of his upper moons. At this point, the Demon Slayers are running out of options, but their one hope is to somehow get Muzan out into the open where they can hold him until the sun rises. In canon, Yushiro achieved this when he managed to seize control of Nakime's perception, and turn the Infinity Castle against Muzan at a critical moment. Muzan intervened and killed Nakime himself, but at that point, it was too late, and the Infinity Castle was already out in the open. But in this timeline, Muzan already knows Yushiro's plan, and he isn't going to stay still until the young demon executes it. The second Yuichiro takes control of Nakime, he thinks he's won and starts shifting the Infinity Castle upward to the surface. But that's when Muzan steps in, because he knows that Yuichiro is invested in this move and can't afford to break his focus. Mitsuri and Obanai see the Demon King approaching and try to intercept him, but they're just too slow. In a single blow, Muzan takes out Yuichiro, bringing Nakime back to her senses and keeping the battlefield shielded from the outside world. But the more important implication of this is that Mitsuri and Obanai aren't saved from the fight against Nakime, as they now have to face the Upper Moon 4 and the Demon King at the same time. This isn't even a close fight, and the 2 lovers die in the Infinity Castle, meaning that Obanai, who was a key member of the final battle against Muzan, does not live to contribute to it. At this point, the rest of the Demon Slayers are well and truly worn down from fighting the Upper Moons, while Muzan is completely fresh and at the peak of his powers. It's not a fight they can possibly win. When Tanjiro, Gyomei, Sanemi, and Giyu face Muzan, he unleashes the full force of his flesh whips against them, leveling the entire battlefield. Tamayo's drug made Muzan's moves slow and weak in the original timeline, but this time he's not fighting with a handicap. The moves that nearly killed Yoriichi land relentlessly upon the Demon Slayers, and they eventually reach a point where they can no longer defend. The sun doesn't rise, the Demon Slayer core dies in the darkness. But there's an even darker storyline that I haven't told you about yet. Think back to the Swordsmith Village arc. Muzan knows exactly how it plays out and the exact time and place where Nezuko discovers her immunity to sunlight. With his memories of the past, Muzan doesn't wait for Hantengu's death. As soon as Nezuko steps out into the sunlight, he's right there in the Swordsmith Village, hiding underground and waiting for the cover of night. We know that Tanjiro doesn't leave the village that day, so when night falls, Muzan emerges from the shadows to attack Nezuko. Yes, we have the likes of Tanjiro, Genya, Muichiro, and Mitsuri to defend her, her, but all of them were injured in their battles against Gyoko and Hantengu. There's nothing that can stop the Demon King in the Swordsmith village, and he succeeds in capturing Nezuko and devouring her right there. The next day, Muzan steps out into the sunlight, and just like he predicted, it doesn't burn him. The Demon King has finally achieved true immortality, and nothing can stand in his way now. So what does the Taisho era look like in this version? Tanjiro becomes a demon slayer, and probably even masters sun breathing, but the chain that needed to break is already broken. There's no anti-Muzan drug leveling the field, and there's no demon rebellion from within led by Tamayo, Yushiro, and Nezuko. Muzan outlasts all of them, and he eventually reaches a stage where the demon slayers can't realistically threaten him. The Ubuyashiki family still leads and funds the Demon Slayers, but the core regresses to a point where they can no longer challenge the upper moons. The Demon Slayers continue to fight an uphill battle, but now their role is more about defending civilians than actively going on the offensive against Muzan. No matter what version we follow, a reborn Muzan would emerge victorious without needing a single spectacular victory. Instead, he would gradually overwhelm the Demon Slayers with patience, information, and the simple discipline of not making the mistakes he knows end him. Even if Muzan doesn't devour Nezuko, he eventually finds the blue spider lily. It's only a matter of time given the resources that he has at his disposal. And with that, Muzan becomes immune to sunlight and achieves immortality, while the Ubuyashiki family withers away under its curse. The demons win over the course of multiple generations, and there's no sunrise to save anyone. But what do you think? Would Muzan's nature allow him to be this patient, or would his arrogance force a mistake? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.